Let's return to politics, though, because Labor has delivered a blunt message to the Greens that it will not be changing its climate or energy policy, no matter the outcome of the next election. As things are poised at the moment, there seems a genuine chance of a hung parliament, and that means one of the two major parties would need some support of the crossbench, formally or informally, to form government after the election. Joining me live now is Greens leader Adam Bandt for more on this. Thanks for your time. So it was a pretty blunt message from multiple senior Labor figures. 43% is their target. They're not budging from it. What's your response to that?
Well, Labor and Liberals seem to agree on at least one thing at the moment, which is that the Greens are going to be in a powerful position in the next parliament. No one is likely to have a majority, at least in the Senate, now according to Labor. And that's going to mean the Greens will be central to getting anything done in the next parliament. So in the next parliament, in that balance of power position, the Greens will kick the Liberals out and push the next government to go further and faster on the climate crisis, including by improving legislation so that we start phasing out coal and gas. Our approach will be to work with the next government to improve and pass their climate legislation. But as things stand at the moment, as you've said, the most likely outcome is that parties are going to need to work together. And we believe that by working together with the next parliament, with the next government, and kicking the Liberals out, we've got the prospect of turning the corner on climate and passing some really good legislation that starts to tackle the climate crisis.
Let's just step through things then from what you've said just then. So if we're in this hung parliament situation and Labor says there'll be no formal alliance, as happened in 2010, but they seek confidence and supply, would you agree to give Labor confidence and supply? Because you've just said there you want to kick out the Liberal government.
Yes, we won't support a return of the Liberal government. We want to kick Scott Morrison out. Scott Morrison and his government have torn down any climate action in this country, and they've turbocharged inequality. And going to the next election, the Greens will be wanting to put a tax on the billionaires to get dental into Medicare, and also push the next government to go further and faster on the climate crisis, including by tackling the critical issues of coal and gas. So yes, our preference and the approach that we will take will be to kick the Liberals out, but to work with the next government and push them to go further and faster, because the more that we learn about Labor's climate policy, the worse it becomes. Labor is now actively boasting that the same amount of coal and gas will stay in the system as under the Liberals. Like, that's not something to be proud of. That's a recipe for climate collapse, and the Greens are going to have to push to fix that.
So just to clarify that point, though, again, you're saying what would that actually mean? You would give confidence and supply, and that wouldn't need necessarily a quid pro quo, but then you'd work on each piece of legislation in the Senate and try to get changes you want made that way. Would that be your approach in the event of a hung parliament?
Well, look, there'd be a variety of ways of coming at it, and you've seen them play out across the country and across history in various ways. We'll come to it with an open mind, but strong principles, and those principles are to put a tax on the billionaires, to get dental into Medicare and build more affordable housing, and also to start taking action to phase out coal and gas, because we need to do it. Now, at the moment, neither Liberal or the Labor Party want to do that. It's only us who want to do that. And in that balance of power position, that's what we'll be putting on the table, and that's what we'll be pushing for.
So to clarify that, you would demand something to give confidence and supply, extract some sort of firm promise just to give confidence and supply to Labor?
Well, look, we just have to look at what the composition of the parliament is. I know there are a lot of independents running in some places. The Liberals are fortunately behind in the polls. It looks like we're heading towards a change of government. But look, they're the issues that we will put on the table. And I think, look, you know, this kind of take it or leave it, it's my way or the highway approach is the worst kind of macho politics that is turning people off politics at the moment. People want to see parties working together, especially on something as critical as climate, rather than this take it or leave it approach. It's the same kind of approach that Scott Morrison is taking to the Corruption Commission. He's saying, oh, you know, you can have my legislation or you can have nothing, and as a result, the country suffers. I don't think people want to see that, and I don't think they'll want to see that in the next parliament. There are going to be third voices in Parliament, and the others will just have to get used to it.
Your voters obviously would like to know, though, what you might do with that balance of power if it does eventuate. You've made it really clear today that you don't want to see Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party with the National Party still in government. So to that end, surely Labor can say, you give us confidence and supply, and then legislation is a piece-by-piece situation. Can you see that unfolding?
Well, our approach will be to ensure that there's a stable and effective and progressive government. And we'll just have to wait and see what the Parliament looks like. But one thing that is crystal clear as you look around the country at the moment, and especially as we start to dissect the climate policies of Liberal and Labor, which is what has prompted this ultimatum from Labor, the only state in Australia where climate pollution is rising is where Labor has a whopping majority, in Western Australia. And you see in the Northern Territory, where there's a Labor government, that they're lighting the fuse on a climate bomb with the Beetaloo gas basin.
Well, their resources economies.
Crystal clear
so
is that
that's what those two economies have in common. They're resources economies. You can say they're both Labor states, but state and territory. The resources economy.
There's a lot of sun. There's a lot of sun in Western Australia, and there's a lot of sun in the Northern Territory as well. We could be exporting the sunlight and the renewable energy from Western Australia and Northern Territory across to Asia, whether that's via direct undersea cable or whether it's via green hydrogen. Western Australia and Northern Territory could be renewable energy powerhouses leading the charge for the country, and instead, when Labor has sole power, and especially when they have dominant power, they instead go for more coal and gas. And this is what we're seeing and what will become crystal clear as we get closer to the election. The only way we're going to get out of coal and gas is by putting the Greens into that balance of power position.
So, but in terms of what that will actually mean, I just want to be really clear on this point in terms of how you will negotiate. I'm sure a lot of your voters want to know that as well. Again, you've been clear you want to get rid of the Liberal Party and Scott Morrison as Prime Minister. So could that mean giving, supplying confidence, allowing Labor to govern without a set, trade-off, without a quid pro quo, and then go to legislation from there?
Look, as I say, there's a variety of options that will be on the table. We have to have a look at what the Parliament looks like. We'll have an open mind but strong principles, and those principles are to tax the billionaires, get dental into Medicare, and take action on climate by starting to phase out coal and gas. That's the approach that we bring.
So, and just on that final one, so is that your priority? You've seen the Labor policy that's been outlined. So your biggest issue seems to be that they have said, and Chris Bowen was saying yesterday, that coal in particular, I'm not sure he said gas would be in the same numbers, but coal would not be affected. Not one coal worker would lose their job between now and 2030. You want to specifically see coal and gas operations shut in Australia. Is that just for our power plants? Is that export as well?
Well, let's run through it. We know the Liberals have a bunch of climate deniers who've got a policy that, in Labor's words, is a total scam. We agree with that. The Liberals' plan means more coal and gas coming into the system. Labor is now saying that there will be not one jot of difference when it comes to coal between them and the Liberals. They are proudly saying that Labor and Liberal are on a coal-hugging unity ticket. Now, they're saying they won't close any coal-fired power stations early. We can't tackle the climate crisis unless we start phasing out coal. That is crystal clear. When it comes to exports, Labor has also said, Labor and Liberal will now have the same position on coal and gas exports, and that is a huge problem because Australia is the world's third largest exporter of fossil fuel pollution. And after Glasgow, the rest of the world is talking about how do we get out of coal and gas. But no sooner is the ink dry than Labor and Liberal are talking about opening up new coal and gas. On climate legislation, new gas in Beetaloo.
Your deal breaker though is coal and gas and how much it's in Australia before you'd support anything. Realistically, we know Labor's not going to budge on export. So would you take something on coal-fired power in Australia or gas-fired power as well? Is that going to be the line you won't cross in terms of supporting Labor's climate legislation?
Well, I'm very concerned about this approach from Liberal and Labor that says we can keep opening up new coal and gas mines and exporting it, bearing in mind that we export 80% of our thermal coal. I mean, so it's our exports that contribute substantially to pollution, but also they contribute to our domestic accounts as well because of how much leaks from those coal and gas mines. But Liberal and Labor are saying, look, we can keep growing and expanding coal and gas exports and building whole sections of the economy off that. But that is wrong. That is wrong because our key trading partners have all got net zero goals, as we will.
But that's up to them
after the election in Australia.
So if they do that and they phase down their use, we won't be able to sell it anywhere else.
Well, two things. They've already said they're going to start phasing it out. And so this idea that we should be putting public money, as Liberal and Labor want to do, into opening up new gas lines is just crazy. Right, that is just crazy. Public money should go to schools and hospitals, and you've got Liberal and Labor saying, no, let's give public money to big tax-dodging corporations. Okay. We need to give sustainable jobs to those communities that isn't based on a false promise that coal and gas will continue forever, because it just won't. And it's only going to be the Greens who are going to push for action on coal and gas.
There's a few other topics you raised in terms of policy areas. We don't have time for them today. Perhaps another day we'll walk through what the Greens might try to extract, if that's what it... how the Parliament looks, of course, post this election. Adam Bandt, thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Tom.